Rachel Ziemba, Adjunct Fellow, Center for a New American Security, Senior Advisor at Horizon Engage. Rachel, just picking up on some of the thoughts there. I mean, we look to the US from a distance at the moment, and it continues to be a strange and wonderful show with very dire consequences. But my question to you is, which of it is a circus that we should ignore? Matt Gaetz to be the top attorney general. Last week, he was being charged with, child, pornography or whatever it is. I mean, there's this somewhat insane appointments, and then there is the other half, or I don't know if it's half, but ultimately, my question to you: which part of this circus should we look at that is serious and consequential for the direction of energy markets going into 2025?
So thanks for having me, Sean. Pleasure to be here. I think some of the most important things are sort of twofold. One is this sort of debate that's going on in the Trump camp around trade policy and tariffs. It's been one of the reasons we haven't actually seen a lot of names on the economic side, right? They were very public, in a sense, acrimony over who should be the Treasury Secretary, particularly around issues of tariffs. Now, of course, the Treasury Secretary doesn't actually have a lot of formal rule over tariffs. That's the role of the Trade Representative, the Commerce Secretary, and we still don't have names for people in either of those posts. So that's important. Omar was alluding to the demand issues and things going flat. I think one of the reasons we've seen this sell off, not only in oil markets, but especially in the broader risk appetite of equity markets that have given back their gains, has really been that some tariff concerns have come back into the picture, as well as the oil specific issues. So I think this question mark of that's going on, as I say, around tariffs. And the other one is the foreign policy nominees, right? We've seen a set of names: Marco Rubio, so not Gates, but Waltz. These are on the margins hawkish, definitely towards China on a trade and other side, but also to some extent even a bit more hawkish towards Russia, perhaps than we might think Trump himself is. Now, the issue here is we can't do all of our leaf assessing, because at the end of the day, Trump himself is going to weigh in on a number of these issues, and there's still a long time. There's still things that can affect the oil market out of the Biden administration, on, for example, sanctions enforcement and the like. I'm not saying they're going to make a massive difference, but they could set up for the U.S.-Russia relationship, in ways that are important. So for me, it's the economic policy piece and this sort of foreign policy element. And of course, over the weekend, we were sort of very much focused on who's the energy team, right? And there I would say not just Chris, Wright in energy secretary, but also Burgum in a new National Energy Council, and all of that's very focused on domestic production, which at these price points, hard to really see producers wanting to bring a lot of additional supplies in the market. So I'll stop there.
Just picking up on some of those trends, I mean, over the weekend, a big story, really. Biden approving Ukraine to use U.S. missiles, long-range missiles into Russia. In the dying hours of this presidency, Joe Biden can still impact things on a level. Your thoughts on that decision, what it could do to the theater of Russia, Ukraine? There was warnings by Putin earlier in the year that if indeed NATO US did this, it would be deemed as the NATO US joining the war as one of the parties. Your thoughts of the significance of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a significant move. That sort of many supporters of Ukraine are sort of asking why it took this long, given in the like. It's hard to know. I think timing of sort of time running out, but also this element, that we saw sort of overnight, or into sort of yesterday of, sort of Russian new attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, stepping things up. And so, I mean, look, clearly, I think in a sense, both broader sides trying to take as many gains on the ground as they can in this time before, there are pressures on both sides for, an end to the conflict. I take Omar's point about, the sort of, Russia collapse narrative being overstated, but it is true that the cost of waging this war is quite expensive for Russia. That doesn't mean it can't continue on for a long period of time, but there are areas where they're hurting. The other thing that I think is looming, relating to Russia is this question of what is going to come in the next sanctions package. I know one of the targets that was out there in the press, the Japanese press really only, was a question of whether Gazprom Bank would finally be added to that list and what impact that might have on further reducing gas flows. I think it's clear that the Biden administration is trying to step up a little bit more on enforcement, but they're still not doing that much. Overall, I think we will, there is this rhetoric, I think, that's coming out of the Trump camp of wanting to, maybe escalate to de-escalate, a rhetoric that they used in the last sort of administration. I think enforcement is going to be, if anything, more difficult, as they're sort of moving around people, to do other priorities such as deportations. One place I might just very quickly, sort of maybe not fully disagree with Omar, but just raise a counterpoint. It's true that U.S. China trade has come down, though it includes some important energy and resources that we pay attention to. But I think it's important to look at where's the end users, the end buyers in the global economy, and therein, yes, Europe is sort of sluggish and demand is not there, but a lot of this trade, a certain portion of this trade China's doing with the global South, which consumers are buying the end products, it's still American consumers. And so on the one hand, that's where I think the concern I have is not just China tariffs, it's an environment of more tit for tat tariffs, weaponizing, sort of weaponizing mineral trade. And, it just adds up to me as slow global growth and a lot more sort of challenges for business, despite all the deregulated talk. And that's not great for, the market that we track. And at the same time, especially in China, we have this electrification trend, right? And so the structural shift in the type of primary energy demand that they have, and I think therein it also leads to, we're seeing this sort of COP go on in Azerbaijan, this week and last with not much happening there. So any case, all I'm saying is the war, sort of the war rages on, and we have these other, these other fronts, and it's not great for demand.
Rachel, one thing that might not roof, and roof generally means that's the word in Europe for the ceiling or the thing above your head. But the I was sort of interested to get your thoughts on what this all means for South America. We did see ahead of the election that Brazil closed down X Twitter. We've seen over the weekend, I think the president of Brazil's wife telling Elon Musk, I don't know what he is, the deputy foreign everything for Trump, to F
Jack of all
off,
trades.
to F off. I mean, it's pretty strong language. Marco Rubio, a kind of a Latin hawk against leftist South Americans. I'm just wondering your thoughts on, and given that the sort of main supply growth of oil in the world, non-OPEC plus supply growth is coming from the Americas, just paint a picture of where they all intersect, you think, as something to keep an eye on going forward.
Yeah, good question. And just on that sort of X point before we go to South America, of course, I can't help but sort of note the headline risk or the headlines around the migration from X to Blue Sky. Where I am, I'm on both platforms now. But no, I don't mean that as a plug, but I mean I think there is sort of, question marks. So I will note that X and Brazil came to some kind of détente, and Brazil is again allowing access. So look, I think where Latin America is concerned, big issue is around migration. Trump wants to deport a lot of people back to Central America. That I think is going to come into play with Venezuela policy, on which you're right. Marco Rubio is definitely a hawk, and his ascendancy probably says something about the Miami Cubans and sort of Venezuelan exiles being an ascendant. I think it's going to be difficult for Trump to pull off any kind of normalization with migration deal, but that's going to weigh over the relationship with Mexico and Central America. The USMCA trade deal is up for sort of rediscussion in a sense in 2026. That's a long time from now. That's going to be sort of a risk. Where Brazil is concerned in production in the Americas, some of this is really going to depend on price, as it is in the United States, right? These are production areas that sort of are market driven, and so we might see additional production come offline. The Canadians, of course, important, one of U.S. main suppliers of energy, themselves are quite worried about what will the tariff dynamics be, and also will Trump exact some kind of financial penalty for the fact that Canada's been very slow on meeting its NATO defense spending targets. So I think the bottom line here is, again, we're back to where we started, which is the economic growth environment and price outlook over 5 sort of 10 years is going to drive production decisions. And that's not looking fantastic right now in this interest rate environment and growth environment.